Let's do it on camera. I hereby call to order this meeting of the MasterPlan Implementation Committee on February 21st, 2013 at 6:30. Our first item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Did everyone have a chance to get the agenda? No. I have an extra copy here. I'll need to have it sent back though because I use it to move forward. I know I got an email just a few minutes ago from you, so I wasn't able to respond.
Yep. That
you asked to put an item on. So if you want, now would be the time to discuss a modification of the agenda, unless you wanted to do that next meeting.
We can. I don't know that I see it as a necessary.
Probably can talk about it anyway, I think so.
Yeah, I guess maybe it'll just come up.
And we're referring to just our overall process and discussions with Jessica, so what she's talking about is putting in as a line item. But I think that we'll hit to it when we get to our chapter review and Jess talks to us about where we're at. You comfortable with that?
Right, I guess I didn't know if you were thinking because... Yeah, okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Any other modifications to the agenda? Potential ones? No? In that case, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
We'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Bear with me, I have to wear both hats today. Okay, the next item of business is the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to see the minutes?
Yes.
No. So, this is the minutes?
Yes.
Did they go out a while back?
I went a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Way back there.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take the notes? Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to
Feeling
facilitate
this
a chair
huge
meeting.
emotional gratitude right now. And then just take it, put it on whatever side you're comfortable with. Awesome.
It's like way more.
I just don't have a laptop.
I'm sorry for not volunteering for that. It's really stressful.
All right, that was awesome, Allison. So, if some people here haven't seen the minutes, there's a couple options. You can abstain, or you can request that we postpone decision-making on it until the next meeting, which is cool if you like. Is there anyone here that feels they want to postpone that? In that case, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So,
I'm just changing one thing about the minutes, which is just my last name, which I had asked to change, but I don't know if Kurt was here or not.
It's probably me.
And it's like I really don't care, but I just feel like maybe I should just change it now and
Is
get
it
it
two
over with.
B's?
It's my last name is Keller, but my email is like my old last name, so it's really not a big deal.
One
I'm
hour
just
or two?
going in there and changing it right now. One, but I care less about that too.
So, with the modification of the last name to Keller, are there any other changes to the minutes? No? I think there was a motion just a second ago, right? To
Yes.
approve and did someone second it? All in favor?
Aye.
All against? That's unanimous 5-0. All right. And are there any comments from the public? Nothing? Okay. Moving into old business, we have the two committees that are set up. The first is the Transportation Committee. We know that the last meeting we set up a date for our working group to try and invite people to come in on March 21st. At this point, at this meeting, and I know we're a little bit understaffed for this today, but my hope is that we can kind of talk about, has anyone done any outreach? Do we have any names of people that we think are going to show up at this point? Do we still want to hold for that date? Is there anyone who's been attached to it yet? Any thoughts? Everyone know what we're talking about?
I say we hold to the date, and I definitely didn't get anybody yet, but I have somebody in mind. So if we hold to the date, that's good. It's kind of embedded in my head. If everybody else is comfortable with that.
All right.
And I also just wanted to clarify that because I've talked to several people, but I don't think that they're comfortable making any kind of they feel like it's an informational session, right?
I would agree.
Or it's not like any kind of like.
We're just getting people together. We're trying to discuss the concept of transportation. We're trying to get interest, and hopefully, after a few meetings like that, hey, welcome.
Hey, sorry to be late.
After a few meetings like that, have it sort of bud a group that can go off and run and be the formative core of something that can go on. So I think we're on the same page. I mean,
Yeah.
what else can we do, really? So.
Right.
All right, so we're talking about the Transportation Committee and the 21st. Is there anyone else that has invited anybody? I haven't found anyone for this. We have in the past minutes, I know that we've gone through and created a series of different slots. You helped in that process of the positions we thought would need to be filled. If you go back and look through the minutes that have gone by, I'm sure you'll find that in there. So my recommendation as an action item to everyone is to go and try and find that list. I'll see if I can email it again. And think of someone that you think might fill that role. And many of them were things like someone from the public transportation.
The police chief, the DPW, Williston, let's see, TVTA.
So that gives a good example of some of the things that are on it. I'll try and
Minion Rail Trail.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I'll try and email that list again, but we need to, the date's coming up. It's going to be fast. So we really need to push. If everyone can just try and find one person. And when you're kind of setting out for someone, just send an email to the group so that people know not to try and go for the same goal.
Should we send like an invitation from this group to those people? I mean,
So instead
do
of
we
sort
have
of
to-
individually filling them out,
yeah, I'm
let's,
just thinking, should we just draft like a quick, or does anybody want to take on the just sending an email
I
to,
think that's a great idea.
or, inviting
those
you to this
folks?
meeting on this night? Yeah, to those folks.
Because
But
I actually have just been talking to people that don't have any necessarily
fine, too.
expertise, just interest in kind of the subject matter, but I remember that we had been really specific with identifying
Yeah.
stakeholders, and if we are going to do that, I feel like if we're going to really expect stakeholders to be a part of this, then I think we need to be more formal with the invitation.
I think that's, yeah.
That sounds wise. Any volunteers to write up an invitation?
I'll volunteer since I came up with the idea.
Thank you.
So why don't I just go through that list and then I'll draft an email and bounce it off of you or the
That
group?
sounds good.
And
What do you guys think about, just by way of trying to feed this process
Sure.
of tone, these are individuals that are already involved in a lot of things. So, part of me wants to say something like, and you use whatever language you like, but just spitballing here, please join the working group for the formation of this new committee that's important, that's going to be handling issues of transportation. But if we say things like, please, I'm wondering, what does it take to motivate the police chief to attend a new committee on top of everything else that they've got going on? What kind of language? Any ideas there?
Well, I think referencing the master plan is really important in terms of how it was one of the top strategies and
Credibility.
right.
I suppose in any way that we could emphasize the commonalities of all the, if the idea is that it's not just heaping more things onto the list, but hopefully streamlining and making more agile the processes that they're already involved in.
I like that. So does that give you some fuel?
Yeah,
Any
totally.
more fuel to give her? No? All right.
What's your first name?
Okay.
I'll just also kind of scan through the lists that we're talking about and just see if I can visit the Williston site and think of you have
I
that?
can give
So,
you.
yeah, any
I
suggestions?
can give you names of people from Williston.
Okay.
There's.
All right.
Because what I can do is draft the language and maybe the potential list of who it'll go to. That way, if
So
anybody
I-
wants to add to that,
I will
we'll just
email
get
that
it.
list. I will find it in the minutes and try and get it out tonight. When I email it, I'm going to ask everyone to see if they can come up with names. By everyone, I mean Wendy. And then
Yeah.
you can take that information and go off and run with it.
Who's going to send the invitation?
I think that at the next, well, it's true, because we kind of want to do it soon, don't we?
Yeah, I think the invitation should go out before we meet again because, and Wendy, I think you know a lot of the people, don't you? Or in your capacity and interest as transportation, I feel like you've at least had informal conversations with a lot of the folks. I'm thinking like who's best to ask other than someone who's...
I haven't so much had conversations with the stakeholders per se, but like as far as Williston, I was asking a friend who's the archivist there, who should I be?
You got contacts.
And so that
okay.
he gave me the contacts.
Okay, so you don't necessarily...
So they're not.
That's a good question, when, and I think first we need to write it and we need to get a list of names. So I think it's going to have to be at the next meeting, but I'll mention this, it's kind of outside the topic, but inside the topic of timing, just to consider this, and we'll talk about it again at the end of the meeting. Kurt, who's here, set up his schedule, the secretary, a great guy, based on the fact that we were going to be every other 2 weeks, and because we went 3 weeks at one point, it skipped. He's been having trouble meeting meetings, so maybe because of this timing, we meet next week and put ourselves back on, or skip 3, which I don't recommend, to get back on that schedule, because I think we might get better participation for people who really kind of planned a regimented schedule. Anyway, I toss that out there because if it is 1 week away, that puts us in a position where if we're meeting in a week and we have all this ready, then we can, in a mere 1 week's time, put out the invitations. I don't know if it's going to work that way. And if it doesn't, and we're meeting in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we're starting to get to the point
No,
where
I think we can do this
But
pretty quick.
if we meet next week, then because of when we scheduled the transportation meeting, we'll be going to 3 weeks again.
Yeah, unless we make a special exception for that one meeting, yeah. All to be considered when we schedule our next meeting at the end. Why don't we say for now that we'll try within a week to get all of the writing and the people that we have on the list via email completed. We can't make decisions outside a public meeting. So if we just say we're going to agree now that when the group by email reviews the document and the people we're going to send it to, that we agree now that we're going to send that, I think that qualifies, but we have to actually vote on
And then who does it, should we agree should it come from you as the chair, from Kurt as the secretary? Is that what you were asking?
Right.
Yeah.
I certainly don't mind sending it. I defer to the group. Honestly, it matters very little to me.
As long as we have contact
I think
information.
it's good if it comes from somebody known and not so known. So
Right.
sending it from my
Right, maybe from the
who is
chair.
this lady?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
So send it
I'll
to me and
draft
send
it and bounce it around, and then ultimately it'll come from your...
All right, so we're going to send this in a week, this invitation. We're going to have some back and forth with it. That would be next Thursday. I'd like a formal motion on that.
So moved.
To meet next.
Not to meet, but to send it. We're going to do this via email.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All against? All right. That puts us in a position where we can actually do that. The next item on the list is the Energy Commission, and I saw a bunch of emails flying back and forth today, Jessica.
Yeah, apparently there was somebody who, they contacted me directly. Kurt had found somebody, and she didn't know what the process was for an application, and so the mayor just wanted me to resend out the administrative code, that it's an administrative committee, it's a mayoral appointment process, and so somebody would have to go through they'd have to fill out an application, write a letter of interest, and send it to the mayor's office, and then he'll decide who goes on the commission. He'll appoint them directly. So just to clarify what that process is, so when you do your outreach, they send their stuff to the mayor.
Okay.
All right.
I got the messages that you sent, the email that has that. Did everyone receive those emails? Okay, great. We'll be able to use them going forward. This is another situation. Now, we're not holding a working group in this case. It's going to kind of form itself I'm not quite sure how the chair of that's going to get chosen. That's sort of nebulous.
That's, and none of, I think it's up to that committee.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're looking for people, it's just
You're just
inquire
recruiting.
there.
I think they
inquire
just
there.
need to send, I mean, if the mayor doesn't think they have the creds to be on the committee, he has the right to not appoint them.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's like a planning board, or it's at that same level in terms of its appointment. It's a planning board, it's a ZBA, it's the Conservation Commission. It's going to have that same level of authority. They're just going to be more of a policy-based group, very similar to the Housing Partnership and how they function, I believe.
All right. That makes a lot of sense to me. Does anyone have any questions? So if you see someone you think might be applicable, and you can give them the information and direct them basically to apply using the information that Jess gave us. Any other questions about that? Then let's move on into new business. Our cover-to-cover review, we went through 2 weeks and came up with a bunch of information. Most of it said check with other people. The honest truth is we have some people here who are very knowledgeable. I especially point to you and to Jason, who were to this chapter that we're in housing industries. The rest of us may have touched on a point or two, but really not as comprehensive. But overall, as a group, I think that in this chapter, Jess, we needed more information. So we reached out for it in our document. And we'd like to, I know all of us would like to see answers be a bit more firm rather than vet this, vet that with this person and that other group. Can you help?
You want me to come up there?
Please.
So what do you need to know?
Can we go through the list one at a time?
Sure, what I did is, you know, some of them, sorry, that's okay, playing footsies with you here. Some of you were at a housing partnership meeting the night that they were going through the list in the master plan. So the housing partnership, who really is the committee in town who focuses on affordable housing issues and basically has been working off of this chapter since the chapter was put into place, and they've been doing a fantastic job. They've done tremendous work in getting some of these strategies accomplished. And so they did a re-review of the master plan chapter, knowing that somebody from your committee was going to be there asking them about, it was specifically about the infill, which you had identified as something you wanted to look at. So 2 of your members were there while they were reviewing it. So they've gone through and they've done their review, so I can just sort of report back what they have identified as things to keep, how things have been accomplished, and maybe you can reference that in your own documents so that you have that information. I guess I have to say what sort of alarmed me when I saw your email was the notation of unrealistic goal. And that really made me nervous because these are goals that are identified not only as number 1 and 2 in terms of the folks that worked on this chapter who are also members of the housing partnership and still believe that they're important goals, and in their opinion are not unrealistic goals. And so I think that if you're going to start identifying things as unrealistic, we need to sort of have a check-in with the groups that oversee this. And the thing is that the housing chapter has a really active partnership group. Not all the chapters have that. So, you know, I think it sort of hit a nerve with me because we have a really dedicated group of individuals who have been sitting on the partnership for a really long time. And these are realistic goals to them. So, you know, I just want to put that out there as that sort of hit my nerve a little bit. But, you know, if you think that they're unrealistic, then I think that you need to check in with them and sort of have that conversation and understand why you think it's unrealistic and have them sort of have that discussion of why they don't think it, and then, you know, go from there.
Which one is unrealistic?
Well,
Is that the first session that I missed?
It was 1 and 2.
It was 1 and 2.
And I'd like to state, I think those are really good comments, and I think there was a political flaw on my part. Those were put out as, and I believe the actual wording was, this could possibly be an unrealistic goal, and we had some discussions about whether it was going to happen or not.
So it's just the editing of it, yeah.
Right,
Okay.
and I think it went on the first 2 to go on to say vet with some of the groups. So what it probably should have said was, we have some concerns, we don't know if this is going to fly,
Right.
we need to check with the other group. You're absolutely right to pinpoint that, and to put that document out without that, my fault.
Okay.
Well, I also, sorry.
And I think some of what looked unrealistic about 1 and 2 was we were questioning whether CPA funds could be, it says CPA funds and/or grant funds to
Right.
provide rental vouchers. Could CPA funds
Yes.
be used for rental vouchers?
Yes, and
That's
they
what
are
we-
being used in other places in the state. So it is, it's not unrealistic because Chatham is doing it right now.
Okay.
So so I think just in terms of the bigger process of vetting, you do not want to go to CPA to vet whether something is fundable under CPA. Their function really is to hear solid applications and make funding decisions. That's their role. They don't have sort of this policy side. If you have questions about whether you think something is fundable under CPA, please go to Ben Webb, the assistant planner. He's the technical planning advisor for the CPA. They pay him to do their administrative work. So please, if there's any CPA questions, go to Ben because the CPA committee they're kind of like an appropriations committee. They decide what gets funded and what doesn't, and it just, I think would throw them off if you showed up and said, this might be a good idea, because they're expected to be like, yeah, we'll fund that, or we won't fund that. So that's just sort of the
I
big.
think that's where the possibly unrealistic came from, on 1 or 2.
Right.
I would further clarify, in fact, I think that's the number one problem we were running into is, well, how do we know? We didn't have at the table the expertise necessary to necessarily answer a question like, is that even allowed?
Right.
So we're running into that and need assistance to figure out who do you ask to resolve whether such and such funds can be used for something. And additionally, I think, some of it was semantics, because I think achievable, unachievable, or is it achievable is the same kind of sentiment that we had for some of these that might have ended up being worded as unrealistic.
Right.
It's like, is it possible to do that?
Right.
More than, and I would emphasize this to you, Jess, particularly, that I think because more likely the concern was not to take, the suggestion wasn't to take something to CPA and say you should fund this. It was more likely we said that's probably not a likely something to be funded by the CPA. So we were more conservative than suggesting that more of these things should go to that money. What we were noticing is how many times it's like, use CPA money, use CPA money, use CPA money. So
CPA is one of the only funding sources for affordable housing, and it actually got expanded on what you can use CPA funds for recently when the law just changed. So you now can use CPA funds for foreclosure, prevention. There's a whole list of things that you can do. It's not just purchasing land and building housing. There's other things that you can do.
And it's not just preserving old buildings.
Well, it can be used for
No, but I'm saying that's what I originally think of when I think of the CPA.
So the CPA has 3 prongs. It's the open space, the affordable housing, and the historic, and now we have recreation that was now added recently. So
Is there some kind of like concise?
on CPA?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the CPA Coalition is a website. If you type in Community Preservation Act Massachusetts, it's the coalition website. It's got
.org?
I think so. It's a .org. It used to be housed under the Trust for Public Land, but I think they're their own entity now.
Okay.
It's a wealth of information on the CPA, the law, what the changes recently were. You can look up communities and see what each community has funded historically. You can look to see how much money each community has gotten over the course of years with the surcharges. I mean, it's just a plethora of information on CPA. So if you want to educate yourself on CPA and more about it, then that's definitely the place to go.
Because I think that was definitely a big piece of the puzzle. We were all kind of like, well, that's a lot of requests from one pot, and we were very uncertain about that.
Right. And to sort of just tie back to, I think I'm now going to start coming to these meetings on a more regular basis. I'm going to start coming so that you can have more technical guidance. But I'll probably float in and out. I'll come when it seems that you need guidance. But I think it's also important that I'm not here all the time, because I don't want this perception that, you're my puppets and you're doing my bidding. So I think it's important that I sort of step away from the process as well and have you sort of go about things in your own way. So I'm gonna start floating in and out, and I'll be here when you need me. And I would say if you ever have questions about anything at any time, email me. If you don't understand what something is, I am absolutely available and will respond to your emails outside the meeting time, or call me. So
You can tell me if you disagree, because I'm speaking for everyone. But my impression is, once the ball gets rolling, we'll probably have less of those demands to make. It's in these initial stages where we kept running into these questions that we couldn't answer.
Right.
Hopefully, once that's taken off, it won't be so taxing to constantly ask you.
I, for one, am thrilled to have discovered the Jessica bat signal is unrealistic goal. Now we know what to do, right?
well, and also, and I think those that participated in the plan would feel that this was a very grassroots plan, and to have, I don't mean to belittle this, but to have a committee of 9 decide that they want to just chuck things out of the plan after we went through a 2-year process and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears of 45 people that dedicated themselves to attending meetings on a monthly basis, I think would just undermine the public process.
That was actually
So-
part of our discussion, actually. We
Yeah.
got a little heated about making sure that
Right.
we're not just crossing things off.
Yeah.
And I think
Or consolidating even. I was talking about consolidating and that was not.
I think if you want to start looking at these strategies and trying to make decisions about what's still viable and what's not, I highly suggest you do it in a public forum, and to hold a public forum, and to, I'm happy to facilitate the discussion if you need me to.
Jason is actually working on that as part of this process.
Perfect.
He's putting information together on how we can take all of what we're doing as we move through this and turn it into an end result public process.
Because I think we need to have a check-in now. I mean, the plan is, 6 years old now. It's time to have a public check-in and to check off the things that have been done and to scratch off the things that just don't make sense anymore. I mean, there are programs in here that were state programs that existed and 6 years ago that don't exist anymore. So it's time to, and then there's new programs that exist now that didn't exist then. So I mean, with every new governor, there's new programs and new state opportunities, and we need to make sure that we're sort of keeping up to date on those things.
So I'm going to kind of summarize then. First, I think as a group, we certainly didn't mean to, we aren't that defined on whether we truly believe something was unrealistic goal. That was poorly used language, and we're just seeking information. I'd like to go through all of the items that we have one by one, and where you can help, great. Otherwise, we'll continue to seek information where we were. I think we're, and I hope everyone agrees, on the right process overall to go chapter by chapter through these line items and try to identify, where we think we're headed. Is everyone in agreement with that?
I am, and I want to just sort of give you the heads up that I would ask maybe you also have an eye towards places where we thought there might be sort of a redundancy or a cross. You get two things that both are a goal that might be achieved through one action, or in some places, and I was trying to find it here, and maybe you guys can help
Allison,
me.
were you going to categorize? It's just reminding me of it. We had that talk about categorizing these.
I don't think it's Allison's fault, because I asked her to hold off a little bit because Jess had made some changes. She was going to come in and talk to us, so we all thought, wait a minute, let's just touch base first. Okay, so my fault.
No, that's.
Well, yeah, and I too had kind of felt like, the emails that we shared kind of made me feel like, well, maybe we should really hold off on taking more steps with information that maybe isn't accurate or doesn't have the full picture. So, right. So that's good we were on the same page.
And in some cases, it was ambiguity, like the Energy Star appliances. Remember, we were trying to determine every public building had, it was just a little ambiguous as to what the specific was.
Well, we'll get there. So do you want to go line by line and
All right,
explain?
number one.
Okay. So what a rental voucher program is, from my understanding, my meetings with the CPA committee, the Housing Partnership, is that you could use CPA funds to provide first month's rent, last month's rent, and down payment for somebody who's trying to rent an apartment, because sometimes it's really hard to come up with that much money upfront cost. And so the partnership's been having some discussions about, is there a way that we can create a program using CPA funds as sort of the seed money, and then maybe doing some sort of deferred loan or something. I mean, they're still investigating it, and it's a complicated program, but the thought was that we would be able to, if somebody qualified for under their salary, that they'd be able to apply to the partnership or CPA and get the first, last, and deposit, so that they could actually move from a shelter or a motel or wherever it is into an actual apartment, if they can be able to maintain the rent after that. So that's that concept.
So in terms of where it stands, we now know through you that this is something the CPA could potentially fund.
Yes.
We're not at this point getting into questions, do they actually have funding or will they? But it is a good question to ask, has anything at all been done? Has this ever been brought to their attention before?
Who, the CPA? No, because the partnership's been focusing on East Street, Everett Street, Parsons, 15 Cottage. So there's been, specifically East Street and Everett Street have been big projects for them, because those were city parcels. There's brownfield issues on Everett Street. They put out RFPs to get developers on those. So that's been their focus. They're starting now to figure out what's going to be their future focus. This is something they're continually talking about. I don't think they're quite ready to sort of bring it to CPA. So they still need to figure out
housing partnership.
Yeah, they're still trying to figure out how a program would even work, and think about even if the CPA committee would even be willing to create a pot of money that we could draw from on occasion. I'm not sure if they're even comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of like to fund projects and see results. They're not really, at this point, have been interested in things that don't have an actual concrete sort of presence to it.
So if the MPIC was going to help push this along, it would be to contact the housing partnership first, try and get a more exact estimate of where they are, where they think they are, and what help they might need to get something going.
Yeah, and I think one of the partnership members is actually doing research on other communities that have done this and how they've structured their program. So they're in the process of trying to pull information together if you wanted to help with that on some level, but I think you really should check in with the partnership before you take action on that.
So my recommendation is that we change this from vet CPA to vet housing partnership.
And by vet then, are we saying like invite them here, go to their meeting? I mean, we had two people at a meeting that...
Right, so the processes we were going to go through it was to spend the time, we're kind of spending an extra meeting now because we have Jess, which is a good idea. Get kind of a sense of who we should go after with this information. You're going to categorize it, we'll do that next meeting, and then the meeting that follows that is going to be to delegate this. Okay, we need to vet this with the housing partnership. Who here is going to contact the housing partnership, find out who's behind it, and come back with a report? That's the process as I intended. It doesn't have to be that way, though. It could be something else if you like.
That was my only question, yeah.
Just send a memo and have them respond?
Actually, now that you say that, I do recall, wasn't there some conversation about us trying to lump the communications together at the last meeting?
Yeah, exactly, because so much of it goes to the same groups. We thought, why send off a dozen
generate
emails?
what I was going to work on, but that all makes me think that there may be value in having some level of responsibility of each master plan committee member in kind of an area, because if you contact someone like I know housing, and then I know the housing people in East Hampton, and they know that I'm working on the master plan, and they know that I'm reporting out and bringing information in, and the kind of miscommunication with people who had attended the meeting and then didn't, the kind of communication that's going like this rather than like could be avoided. And I know that we all don't have like a ton more time in our calendars to go to other meetings, but then maybe it would over time become easier if each of us adopted kind of a subject or a focus, or...
That seems totally reasonable.
I guess I would just chime in that I wonder if there are ways to reduce the amount of that time we spend, though, sort of a work smarter instead of work harder method, if you will, where a lot of times I think a preliminary, well-worded letter or email can resolve a lot of, half the time the first answer is you're talking to the wrong person, you're asking the wrong person.
We already just went through that. That's what we just did.
So doing that might reduce the amount of footwork we had to actually go do individually. I like the idea, and I agree generally, if you put a face and give somebody a vested interest. At the same time, I wonder how we'll divvy that out, because I know I've got my areas of interest, but they're way late. We haven't gotten to them for...
There'll have to be some areas where people are doing, we're covering places that are outside of our primary areas of interest. I want to let that, and I've used this word before, sort of happen organically, because I find that what happens is I ask who wants to handle it, and the people who are interested in it tend to migrate to that.
Right.
And then over time, like for instance, whenever the word transportation comes up, you start to just focus on that one liaison.
That one person that you
Yeah. Exactly. So I think it is important, it is good, and we'll keep an eye on it if it's not happening, but I think it's kind of happening naturally.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I think what I'm hearing though too, like through the process, it's gonna lead to that, like narrowing down, is like maybe we're gonna send out a list of questions to the group and then bring it down closer. And if we need to, I was just looking, there's what, 8 of us, not quite right now, and how many chapters, so maybe we'll knock a few chapters off and end up with like 5 that we really need somebody to then, okay,
Serve as
we
a
need somebody on the ground in this meeting. So I think it's like a hybrid.
So the question was, what does vet mean? And the answer is that once we get this list, this chapter, or maybe 2 or 3, we'll decide, then we're going to find that individual through the process of asking, through this, finding someone that's qualified in our group and delegate, and have them communicate via written media, email, whatever, or go talk to them, or be the one that participates in the meeting, or however that may happen. And we're going to kind of deal with it in the way that each individual member that's assigned responsibility for it wants to deal with it. Whatever they think is going to fit with the community they have to communicate with, or, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. So, does that answer the question? Number 2.
Okay, so the down payment assistance is kind of like the rental voucher program, except it's for down payments of purchasing homes. So to help provide that down payment so that somebody could, and they have to be within a certain income qualification.
So that'd also be vet the housing partnership.
I think you want to work with the housing partnership on this task. But again, I think this is not, even though it's number 1 and 2 in the strategies, I don't think the partnership's there yet. So I don't think you want to push them to.
Well, that's what I was saying, maybe like, send them a memo saying this is what we're working on, and, when you're ready, be aware that we're there to support you.
Right.
And whatever help we can offer. Instead of setting up everything and then all of a sudden going, oh, they're not ready to do anything, they're wasting a lot of time.
I like the use of the word support as opposed to light a fire under it. Well, anyway. Okay.
Unrealistic is the best.
Yeah, it's definitely better than language I've been using. Listen, vet with housing partnership, so we're switching it from CPA. Also, I just want to clarify, nothing's been done so far on this. They're trying to put together a plan, but it's never been brought before the CPA, is that correct?
No, never has.
Number 3.
Okay, Chapter 40R is adopted. That is for downtown area. There's a map in that other conference room if you ever need to look at it. But it's basically from one ferry down Pleasant, down Main, down Union, down Cottage. So it's sort of our C downtown. All of the churches, the Catholic churches that are vacant, are on it. So we have a couple within the Franklin Street neighborhood, so that would be the Sacred Heart Church is also. There's some parcels also off of Church Street that have been identified. So the Chapter 40R program is, it's an overlay zone. It's not mandatory. It's an option for developers. They can develop as long as they hit the design standards that have been set up by the city. It's a by right development. They don't have to go through a special permit process. As long as they hit the standards, they get their project. Their requirement is that they have to provide 20% affordable houses for affordable units of the total units that they build. It's also for mixed-use developments, but it always has to have a residential component. It cannot be for commercial development. So there has been, we were approached last March by the town of Southampton to explore the possibility of expanding the 40R. doing a joint district with Southampton and East Hampton, where East Hampton could have the land for the housing. You have to have this requirement where you have to be able to walk to services. That's part of the requirements for the 40-hour program. You have to be able to walk a half mile and go get a gallon of milk. You can't just be in the middle of nowhere. There's very specific areas in the city where it would even be allowed to do this type of zoning. So it had been discussed when we were doing the 40-hour process to sort of look at that area, but there were two things that sort of hindered the South Main Street. It was, there's no sidewalks, so you couldn't actually walk to the Big Y. And that's basically the biggest challenge there. So it's sort of been just dropped. Southampton has moved forward. They have gotten their 40-hour adopted. So, you know, I don't know where that leaves us, but there was this idea, like, this could be a gateway. We could share the same design standards. We could have, you know, sort of a, and it makes, you know, from a gateway perspective, it makes sense. But, you know, I don't think it's probably a high priority in terms of the zoning work that needs to be done, in my opinion.
So as of right now, with the adoption of the 40-hour that's already occurred in our downtown, we can safely say this has been done.
It's done.
This is successful.
This is done, yep. I would check it off. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, actually, are you working off the list that we created that is saying done or not? Yeah, okay.
It's saying completed, but then it also says Parsons, but not Northampton Street. So the Parsons doesn't...
That was just my notes. We weren't
Okay.
quite sure.
Parsons is not a 40-hour project, it's a 40B project, so
Yeah.
it's a different...
Yeah.
And there is, if you're interested in the Chapter 40-hour program, there's the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD. You could Google Chapter 40R, Massachusetts, and it will take you to their website, and you'll find the legislation, you'll find all of the supporting information that explains the Chapter 40R program. It's a very complicated zoning thing, and I'm happy to sit down with you and talk to you in more detail about it.
We'll strike the notes.
Can I ask one question on that? On the 40-hour, what's the percentage of living space to business?
It has to be more residential than business, so it has to be 51% residential and 50% can be business.
Is there a requirement on the size of the business? 10,000 square feet and the size of the building?
I have to go back and look at the zoning. I think there were different standards for the square footage, but it has to, the requirement is it cannot be just commercial. It came out of the housing programs through the state, so it's a housing zone, it's a housing ordinance. It's not a commercial development ordinance.
One more quick question. Can they build a housing separate from the business? Does it have to be incorporated on top like they do?
No, it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
They could have like a, you know, a small commercial building surrounded by houses. You and I have had this conversation many times.
I get mixed up, I'm just curious.
So if you want to come to my office,
yeah,
I'll show it to you in more detail.
wanted-
We'd have to go with the ordinance and look to see, because there's density requirements, you know, there's different standards for different types of housing. So if it's multifamily, it's got to be 12 units per acre. If it's single family, it's got to be 8 units per acre. So it's
I've spent time in your
complicated.
office going over this, and I can tell you, I don't want to do that.
You know what, it might be helpful to mention as well at this time, particularly given the time constraints we have,
Yeah.
that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but that one of the conclusions we've come to is that in the public disclosure portion, which will probably take the form, among others, of an ECAT program open to the public, but then we would go into the details of these things. So like there'd be an opportunity for us to explain to the public all the details of 40R specifically in you know, a program with that category of topics specifically, so that people that were interested in it could tune in, get all the details. People that weren't, didn't have to, and they could tune into the things that were pertinent to them.
I don't envy the task of summarizing that. All right.
So number 4?
Number 3, I want to say we're going to strike the notes and just keep it as complete.
Just say
Number
complete.
4.
Yep, I would. Number 4, I mean, this is sort of the big joke of the master plan, is that every chapter has the city hiring staff for that chapter. So,
Of course.
you know, it would be great to have a housing specialist that works for the city. The fact of the matter is, the budget is extremely tight.
It's unrealistic.
And it's, you know, at this time, it's unrealistic unless there's a huge infusion of, there's a huge infusion of funds that come into the city, but I think it's important to keep even some of these on because I think it shows that some of these topics are so vast. It would be fantastic to have staff at least dedicate a portion of their time, whether it's a part-time, you know, 10 hours a week housing person would be great, but, you know, right now we're functioning fine the way we are with the housing partnership, but.
It's, I mean, how can I disagree with that? That's all totally true, and yet our role is to try and find ways to make things happen.
Well, I think you need to think about ranking things. I mean, I think you need to start thinking about high priority, medium priority, low priority. I wouldn't take it off the list, but I would put it as low priority.
Right,
I
but
wouldn't
even
spend
then, we
energy
still
on
need
it.
to have a conversation about, you know, what's being done. You know, first off, has anything been done? Was there ever a discussion about hiring for this?
Well, I have a very simple idea. I mean, we're in a 5-college area and there's a ton of city planners coming out of UMass, right?
Intern?
Is there not an intern? Is that ever been explored?
I have a graduate student working with me right now on a housing production plan. So she's drafting a housing production plan.
Yes.
We're paying her a small bit of money, but it's the partnership.
The
that's
federal
paying.
work study could pay for somebody to do this, I believe.
Possibly, but I would want to make sure it's somebody who actually knows something about
Well,
housing, and I wouldn't want to have to spend a lot of time training somebody, you know what I mean? There's
There's
an
gotta be
efficiency.
somebody. So I'm just saying in terms of like, I don't necessarily, because this is such an important issue,
Right.
I wouldn't want to drop it as down to low priority, but leave it as high and then suggest maybe exploring federal work study and internships.
There's also CPA funds. I mean, I hate to throw it out there, but there are people that use CPA.
Why not?
There are plenty of communities that use CPA funds to hire somebody part-time to work specifically on housing issues. So, you know,
Does
that's
your
not as
intern
unrealistic.
count in any way, the one you already have? Is
The what?
that, you said you have an intern already that's working with you. Does that in some way count?
Sure,
That's
if
some
you want to,
progress.
if you'd
Well,
like
I mean,
to
really,
mark it up,
We're just-
sure.
This is,
I mean, I have interns doing stuff all the time.
This is why we were trying to come up with so many variations on what we called these things too, because sometimes, and we got creative with our verbiage, but you know, the idea is not achievable in the near future, or long-range
Well, that's what
ideal,
I'm saying, you know,
things like
long
that.
range, medium, short range. I mean, you can label it any way you want to, that you need to.
Well, what do we have on that item? Does anyone have the sheet handy? What do we say?
Say hire part-time housing person, vet with housing
Vet with
partnership,
housing.
Possibly complete, possibly obsolete.
And we had, wow, that seems
Possibly something.
we didn't know. So it looks like maybe we could change that to what do we have for like partially underway?
Yeah, that's what I'm missing, is the key.
I don't have a key.
No one had it, and I didn't save it on my computer.
Oh.
So if anyone has a copy of that
Sorry,
key,
I
I'm
have it.
desperate
I'll
for you to type
recreate
that
it
up
and
and
send it.
email it. Yeah.
I'll thank you.
What, you slide it down here?
You're the only. That's the only existing copy of it.
Well, I have one, so.
Completed discussion stage, planning stage, implementation stage, ongoing, some progress, no progress, delayed, awaiting funding, obsolete, partially implemented, and vet.
Awaiting funding
Waiting for
in progress?
Awaiting funding,
You need just one?
implementation.
awaiting funding.
Awaiting.
Yeah, I think awaiting funding is really it. I mean, if we went to in progress, that would kind of, or something along, that would be kind of indicating, well, she's already reaching out and getting interns, so it's kind of happening on its own. So we might want to put some indication that that's in there, so maybe some progress. That might be saying too
I'm not
much
sure how much of this should go
in the minutes.
but you can delete.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna add a new category to the,
Sure, that'd be
yeah,
awesome.
that way we have the old one, but now we also have the new one.
So just to
Will
be
you put it
clear,
on there? Because if I'm going to recreate this and send it out to the group, you just write it on there if there's any.
yes, there's new keys. Okay, so we all agree on awaiting funding. The question is, do we want to take an extra step on this and saying something has been done or not? Yeah.
No.
No. Okay, awaiting funding number 5.
Number 5.
All right, so the zoning amendment to allow planned unit developments with an arts incentive. This has not been done, but this is something that I think a lot of the artists in the community believe that there's a need for live workspace that's deeded affordable for artists. We have affordable units, we have a lot of live workspaces, but they're quite pricey. They're not cheap. The units at Eastworks and Mill 140 are market rate units. So, anytime somebody comes in looking to buy a mill, I always ask them, is this something you want to do? There's no takers yet, but I think this is, again, worth keeping on there because we know that this is a need, but it hasn't been
Cultural
done yet.
district thing, would that facilitate?
Is there anything that the city can do in terms of supporting that? Is there,
I mean, when people come in with project ideas or they're going to buy a property and they're talking about residential, I mean, I always bring it up with them, but it's hard to develop residential units. There's a whole different financing to it and standards that you have to hit. It's not as easy as developing commercial property. So
When it says some portion of the 12%, just help me wrap my head around this. Is that 12% that we already have?
I don't know what that number is about. You need to actually, Jackie Perusa Pereira is the person you need to talk to about this. She basically wrote this chapter. She's on the Housing Partnership.
and
So-
my reading had been that at that time, we thought we had 12% of our housing was affordable housing.
It's never been that high.
That was what we were shooting for, was for 12% of housing to be affordable, and of that have some of the,
I don't know what
We
that
can
12%.
contact Jackie.
Yeah, I don't know what that 12% is, I'm sorry.
I think that's.
It might be just a typo and should say 10%. Well, I don't know.
Hey, whoa.
Well, that's.
So I'm not sure what that is.
Thank you. Yep, I got it. All right, she's on the list. So vet Jackie Brusso Pereira, and
For the Housing Partnership.
we know that it hasn't been done, so no progress, NP, and Housing Partnership, got it. And I guess when we contact her, we'll figure out if they've got any ideas on how to do it. Just one extra question I want to ask in this. Typically, given that it's under affordable housing, or they seem to be indicating it's a part of affordable housing, what is the incentive to developers? Very briefly,
What's the incentive?
what are they getting? What are they getting for giving cheaper space to artists? Why would they do it?
How would you do it?
No, how? Why?
Why? Because we have a huge artist community in East Hampton that's growing, and this has been identified as a need for a long time. I
And
think
they're paying really high rents, and I'm sure they would migrate in a heartbeat if they could pay lower.
It's a huge incentive.
Well, I understand why we want to see this as a city, as residents, but what's the developer getting?
Oh, so units are subsidized. So they get federal subsidies, state subsidies, tax credits. It's a business building affordable housing. There are developers that dedicate all of their portfolio to developing affordable.
Solid buildings.
Okay, so as long as it's under affordable housing, all right. Awesome, so we got that. Number 6.
Hold on. Number 6, I think this has been accomplished, I would say, under 40R, because the 40R design standards have a section in there about keeping green space and encouraging the use of sustainable materials in green buildings. So I don't think it's necessary to develop anything more than that, because I think we already have it.
And we have that new thing that's been being discussed that we're putting out for more information for the green building, right? Is that not?
We have the stretch code, which is different.
We just talked about in the planning board adopting the
green development standards, yeah.
Are
So
we calling that complete or
I
ongoing?
would, I'd say it's done. I'd check it off.
Okay. More might happen, but it's still been done, so more is just gravy, so complete.
Right, I think it's already accomplished under the 40-hour program. Number 7, one of the Housing Partnership members who used to run the Housing Authority, she was going to check in on number 7. They discussed that at their last meeting. So that's something that's on the Housing Partnership's radar screen. Again, I think this is one of the things where if they needed your support for something, that would be helpful, but I think you should this is in progress.
Or is it discussion stage?
Oh my God, Joe. I'd call it in progress.
Okay.
But we already have in progress on that, do we?
That's what it was like in some progress.
Progress, okay.
Did you specifically talk to the guy that has one?
One fair, he's not doing like workspaces, he's doing affordable units, but they're not.
It's okay.
Let me tell you this.
They're gonna be called building permits,
Sorry.
I
sure.
didn't.
He's really
I was being
great.
selfish.
Yeah, they're awesome.
No,
But
great.
it seems like, yeah, he would.
They were supposed to pull building permits in January and this hasn't moved yet, so we're still waiting. Okay,
Develop an education piece.
where are we at?
Define affordable
This
housing.
is, again, Housing Partnerships got it on their radar screen for a priority for this year. I don't think that they will move forward on this until the housing production plan is completed. So we're in the process of updating it. We have a production plan that was first developed in 2006. We're now updating it now. Once that plan is completed and it has a list of strategies of things they need to move forward on in terms of affordable housing for the city, I think that they'll start working on the education piece. So this will be happening, but it won't happen until the housing production plan is done.
Planning stage.
Planning stage, sure.
Okay, number 9, require Energy Star rated appliances in all city permitted developments. I'm gonna try and hit 15 tonight, people, but we only have
Oh,
a
I
few
think
minutes
we
left.
could, really?
Yeah, we're at 4 minutes.
It's so much fun, huh?
We could do half now, half next time,
All right.
that'd be great.
This, again, I'm a little, we'd have to check in with Jackie, but I think at the time when we drafted this, I don't think Energy Star appliances were required. They are now. With any affordable unit, they have to use Energy Star. The other thing that we have now is the stretch code, which I just mentioned, which is the building stretch code, which requires a certain level of efficiency in the building itself. So this may be something that is complete or no longer, it's one of these weird policy things that have changed since then that
Obsolete.
obsolete, that's the word I'm looking
And this is all new build.
That's
I
what
think
we
is
had.
the other question, right? It's all new build.
We had obsolete,
We had
yeah.
obsolete, so
Okay.
that's what we thought is.
I think we stay with that.
You
Alright.
have,
Covered.
you have vet with mayor. See, I didn't know what all these little
Yeah, I
letters meant.
You didn't have the key.
So vet with mayor, I think, again, vet with the housing partnership, or even the building inspector might be one to check in with.
Well, if it's obsolete, it's obsolete. Should we even bother vetting?
I think you need to verify that it's
Okay, so
obsolete.
obsolete vet with, what did you just say?
Yeah, I would say housing partnership, maybe even the building inspector about the stretch code and Energy Star appliances, but.
So housing partnership and buildings.
This doesn't specifically say there's nothing about affordability in here. It says
Yeah.
all city permitted developments, so.
This might be one that needs to be
Buildings.
explored a little
Yeah.
bit, or change, the
Start
wording changed or
broad,
something,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, number 10 is done.
Procure appropriate developer, right, well, it's done,
Yeah.
done, complete. 11,
11, this is gonna be accomplished through the housing through the housing production plan. We're working with a student from Westfield State to do analysis of vacant and underutilized parcels for housing and economic development. So she'll be doing a GIS
In
map.
progress?
Some progress.
In progress.
In progress?
Yep.
in progress. Do you
Number-
know her name?
Off the top of my head,
All
I'm
right,
sorry.
No problem. 12.
12, this is again something that the partnership has been talking about, but I think they would need to establish a housing trust in order to do it, which they're not sure is politically feasible at this time, so I would keep it. I don't know how you want to rank it. But
We had-
Homes? Really?
so, like, for instance, there was a house that was up for foreclosure on East Street, and so the partnership was like, wouldn't it be great if we could just go buy this house and then be able to turn it into an affordable unit and add it to the inventory?
So they've discussed it, but nothing else has happened.
They've discussed it.
Discussion stage. Housing partnership. Discussion stage, vet with housing partnership.
Okay, 13, this is ongoing. I mean, that's kind of like a no-brainer, that's what I do for a job. I apply for grants
That's 13.
constantly.
That's what we had.
Ongoing.
Ongoing. is what we
Ongoing.
had.
More there.
I think 14 is ongoing.
Work with developers. Okay, we scratched part of this out here where it said provide incentives for developers willing to include green space building in their designs. As a group, for whatever reason, we decided that wasn't part of it.
I think that's something that needs to be vetted with the partnership or at the public forum.
All right, where are we with this again, Jessica?
You're at 14. Ongoing, I said.
I'm trying to please
Going
everybody.
housing partnership. I know.
I think 15 is ongoing.
Let's stop there.
Really? I could blast through if you needed me to.
Well, if the group doesn't mind staying, we've still got to discuss other issues like how we're going to do our scheduling, and it is 1 minute from our deadline.
And I have to go.
Yeah, I think we should wrap it and
But
just touch
I
next
could-
meeting.
Do
This is
you
how-
want me to just email this stuff to you? Like I can just
That'd be good.
draft, just either fill it in your thing or type up something or?
Yes. Sure.
Yes,
And take one step forward on that one. Okay. Great, that has been fantastic and really helpful. When you email that, Jess, please just hold off of it until Allison emails out the key list. So that's a priority, is to type this.
Or I can I can put it into a,
We want to see our key codes.
oh, okay. Well, I don't want to start assigning things to anything, but I can at least give you, like, I can go through and say, done. I can just,
Fine. Yeah, you do that and
something
we'll-
easy, and then you guys can decide how you want to rank it in your
We'll do all that
process.
work.
Okay.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
helping us with this. All right, folks, that was our Chapter 40 housing. We have in here next chapter review. I don't think we're quite there yet. We still have half of this to do next meeting. Are there any, before we talk about our next schedule, are there any reports from any of the topics that we talked about in the past? Anyone have anything that?
I have nothing.
Nothing? Then we have this issue of our meetings. On the 21st of March, I believe it is, we're having a meeting here with the Energy Committee. So we're locked into that as a meeting day.
21st.
I know that, like I mentioned before, some people are having trouble with the fact that we skip, it's messed up their scheduling. So what do we want to do? Do we want to meet again in 2 weeks? Let me see if I can find a calendar somewhere here.
2 weeks would be
Calendar, today's 21st, 2 weeks would be the 7th. And then the next meeting is the 21st. So that keeps us on track with the 21st being 2 weeks, 2 weeks. But it messes up some people that we might not see again.
But are we, so where does Kurt stand? This puts...
I don't know. He told me that he wasn't able to make the meeting before, and he emailed me that he couldn't make this meeting because he already made plans. I don't know if that's just something that he can change or not. I have to talk to him.
Yeah, we need to touch base with him, I think. It seems like he's pretty much the only one that's got a problem with this program.
So we'll keep it on schedule, and if it's something that continues, then after our 21st meeting, we can maybe shift or be more flexible then, because we have this. Is everyone in
Well,
agreement?
he may end up changing, and then we change on him.
Yeah,
So-
it's true. I'm always trying to do what I can to make it work the best for everybody. The next meeting then is going to be 7th at 6:30. I'll try and get the rooms right this time. The only other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't think I mentioned it
March
officially.
7th, you said?
Yes.
Just as a note, I won't be able to attend that one because I'll be out of town, but I'm gonna
Okay.
do this transportation invitation draft before it'll go out, so I'm sorry.
No
But
problem, thank you.
I'm happy to take on any tasks in between to make up for my absence.
Well, I just wanted to make an announcement here. Officially, that Neil Parks is no longer a member of the group. He's resigned. I'm going to notify Barbara. That puts us down to 8 members and we're officially a 9-member group with 1 alternate. So we're 8 members and don't have an alternate. So we need 2 spots, 1 official and 1 alternate that we need to start recruiting for. So if you see anyone or know anyone that is interested, I'm going to let Barbara know. She'll post it. I need a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
I
Aye.
Thank you, guys.